episode 99 of the Joomla Beat podcast, and this week I speak with Steve Burge from OSTraining, probably the biggest provider of training for open source content management systems in the world. And he shares how he had built up his business to where it is now, managing a membership site with thousands and thousands of members from around the world.
Latest Joomla news, design tips, marketing ideas, and interviews with experts in the industry.
Beginner or professional, this podcast is for Joomla enthusiasts.
Welcome to the Joomla Beat podcast with your host, Peter Buey.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Joomla Beat podcast, the podcast all about designing, developing, managing, and marketing your Joomla website. This is episode 99. One more away from 100, getting so close. I'm doing so much prep work at the moment to get that episode up and running. Just to give you a little bit of a sneak peek of what you're going to get from it, I've been interviewing, I think, 10 different people doing lightning interviews, all these snippets of their lives, how they use Joomla on a day-to-day basis, and how they got involved in the community. Also looking back at some historic podcast episodes. Not just from looking back at the Joomla Beat podcast episodes, but I'm digging into podcasts that were created right at the beginning of the Joomla project by a man named Peter Russell. He was one of the founding members of the Joomla project and had been creating podcasts well before I even touched Joomla. So it's pretty cool to have those podcast episodes, and I'll be pulling some snippets from it to compare how the Joomla project was back then to how it is now. So it's a little bit of a walk back in time over the last 10 years, of course, of Joomla to see how it's progressed, if any of the predictions back then were true, and so forth. So episode 100 is going to be quite jam-packed full of really cool content. Last but not least, if you want to do a shout-out, a congratulation note, or just say hi and where you're from, you can do so by leaving a message for myself and Martina on the Joomla Beat Speak Pipe page. You can get to it on the contact page on the Joomla Beat website, or you can just go to speakpipe.com/JoomlaBeat. And there you can leave a 90-second message, anything you want really. And usually the quality is really good that comes through there. So I can include it into the 100th episode of the podcast so that you can cement yourself in history and be a part of the 100th episode. So you can do that. And I'm pretty excited. I've still got a couple more interviews to do to jam into that episode, but that should be released next week around the 21st of October. So if you're listening out for it, make sure you've subscribed to the newsletter, subscribe to the iTunes store or to the Spreaker network so you can get notification as soon as that one comes out. It's going to be a blast. And like I said, if you want to be involved, jump on and leave a message on SpeakPipe or anything else that you can, and I'll include it into the podcast show. One more thing that I needed to mention that I probably neglected to say, but I will be at the Joomla World Conference this year in India, and pretty looking forward to it. I'm there as a part of the project as well, but I'll be doing a presentation on web accessibility. So that's building websites and checking websites for visual impaired users, for cognitive impaired users, and users that can't use the keyboard. But it's not just for them. It's a whole bunch of other factors, like being able to use your website and navigate the website on your phone, but with bright light. So having the contrast ratios right, all sorts of things. So I'll be doing a 2.5 or 3 hour workshop on this. So if you're in India and you're coming to the Joomla World Conference and you're interested in accessibility and building your websites for it, I recommend coming along to the workshop and seeing exactly what it takes to build an accessible website, and also skilling yourself for it so you know how to do it, how to test for it, and what you can recommend for your clients as well in regards to making websites more accessible for anyone to use across the world. So I'm looking forward to doing that, and I'm looking forward to meeting everyone that comes along to that workshop as well. So looking forward to it, and hopefully see you there too. Anyway, this week, like the intro said, I have Steve Burge from OSTraining. He talks about building up OSTraining, or even how he came to the idea to start it. Who would come up with an idea to teach everyone around the world how to do Joomla websites? It's on the scale that he's done it. It's pretty amazing and pretty cool. But Steve tells us how he's built up his business, how he's managing the memberships, and what he'd had to do to actually enhance that user experience in regards to managing the entire membership database, and make that experience better for the users viewing his training videos all around the world. So bring out your notepads, grab a pen. There's a lot of learnings here, and I'll see you after the interview.
Beat. Joomla Beat.
Thank you for joining me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to finally have you on the podcast. I've known you for quite a while now, and for some silly reason, I just haven't gotten around to actually sitting down with you and doing this podcast. So Steve, sorry, but thank you for finally joining me on the podcast.
Oh, thanks, Pete.
So we, I think, first physically met at Joomla World Conference in Boston, and I didn't realize how tall you were. Or how short I was, actually.
Well, you've probably been shorter for a lot longer than you've known me.
Yeah. yeah. But anyway, Steve, for those people that don't know you or haven't met you in person, could you give a little bit of a background on how you got into the Joomla space and what you actually do on a day-to-day basis now?
Sure, thanks, Pete. I am an English guy living in Florida in the US, and running a training site called OSTraining. But how I got here and how I ended up in this situation is a bit of a longer story. How I got involved in Joomla is a story that starts with Japanese history as perhaps the most irrelevant and useless thing that I can think of when it comes to working in IT now. I graduated college in England when I was in the year 2000, and there was a recession of sorts going on. And I remember someone talking to me about getting a teaching job in Japan. And so most of my friends who'd graduated a little before me had a real hard time getting a job, and suddenly someone offered me a good paying job teaching English in Japan. I went over there and I met my future wife, who had the same offer from where she was in New Jersey in the US. And so me and my wife lived in Japan for several years. And then when it came time to leave, my wife really wanted to get a master's degree. So we started looking around for different options. If we went to the US, it would have been a 2-year degree and would have cost about $80,000 US.
$80,000. That's huge.
College in the US is ridiculously expensive.
Right.
And I mean, this was 10 years ago as well. It's probably got even more expensive since then.
Right.
And so we started looking at your neck of the woods. We started looking at Australia.
Oh, right. Yep. Sydney.
Yeah, University of Sydney.
It's a good university.
Oh, yes, it was wonderful. Although it was wonderful, I think, for the business people. We went down to Sydney. It was really cheap and affordable, and it was just 1 year. So you could get a visa to come to Australia, live in Sydney for a year, get your master's degree real cheap. So we took some of the savings we had from Japan and went and did that. And I guess I had some vague ideas of becoming a professor. I'd always been a teacher and thought about becoming a professor. And I guess I got a bit of an awakening at University of Sydney. I seem to remember coming up on the first day, and there was this beautiful, sparkling new building right in downtown Sydney. It looked like a gleaming office building, and I went inside, and there was new computers and a new auditorium, and everything was really expensive. And they said, "Hey, welcome to the University of Sydney. This is the business building. This is where all the business students and the MBA students take their classes." And I said, "Well, I'm actually here to study history." And they said, "Okay, you go out the back. You're in the shack, the little trailer."
Oh, no.
Out the back of the building,
Oh, no.
the one with the leak in the roof, and smelling really badly, and so that was where we got our degree in
the tin shed at the back of the uni.
It literally was a tin shed at the back, and all my history professors were way smarter than me. They spoke several languages, just geniuses sitting in this little shed at the back, and they all told me, "Okay, if I have one piece of advice, it is never become a professor."
Your dreams were shattered.
They were. I mean, these guys were just incredibly intelligent, and I think the way universities are, it's hard to make a living as a professor these days unless you work in one of these really top-class universities and you have tenure. These guys were working 5 or 6 hours a week. They couldn't get many classes. They were always kind of living paycheck to paycheck. And to a person, they told me that I should look into getting into business instead.
See that big shiny building that you came from? Try and go back there.
Yeah, exactly. So, hey, you should have done an MBA instead. So I had to finish my history degree, and I was about halfway through, and I was writing my dissertation, and I started to look around for something to put my dissertation findings online, and bumped into Mambo at the time. I guess I didn't really look around much. I mean, this was 2003, I think. WordPress was probably just about forking from B2 Evolution. Probably wasn't even WordPress at that point. Drupal was still a glint in Dries' eye in a dorm room in Belgium. And Mambo was it at the time. And the first Mambo website I ever built was for my history dissertation. The site stayed up for about 10 years, but by the time 10 years were up, I don't think even I was interested in the topic any longer.
Yeah, had enough.
Yeah, took the site down. But yeah, there was that year in Sydney, I guess, was fairly pivotal. I discovered that I was probably better off going into business than I was becoming a teacher, and I discovered Mambo too.
So at that point in time, you were getting your grounding and knowing that you should be starting a business of some sort, and you found Mambo, and obviously you really liked it and continued using it. At what point did you think, I know, I'll start up a training company called OSTraining and start teaching everyone around the world how to use Joomla and those other open source content management systems as well? Like, how did you make that transition, and when did you start that all?
Oh, okay. Long story indeed.
Okay.
So came back from Australia, was living in the US. You ever seen the movie Deliverance with Burt Reynolds?
No, I don't think I have.
Okay. It's probably not a date movie exactly. Not a...
Okay.
It's more of a kind of quasi-horror movie.
Right.
About some guys who go in the woods and get attacked. But that movie was set in Georgia, in the US, in the deep south of the US, and I'd ended up living there with my now wife, and I was still working as a teacher, but the entry level for a teacher in the deep south of the US is about $30,000 a year, particularly if you're coming from England and your qualifications are not quite accepted in the US system. So I was working as a teacher in Georgia, and I started to build up a web design business in the evenings. And it took me probably about 6 months before my evening job as a web designer was making more money than my day job as a teacher.
Oh, wow.
And I was doing things such as taking client calls in the lunch break. So I'd finish teaching a class, then I'd get a voice message from a customer saying, hey, I've got a question about my website. So I'd step outside, make a phone call, come back in, and finish grading some papers. So we actually started as just a regular traditional web design company. And back in those days, this was just after the fork. I remember standing at my desk during I guess the Americans call it recess, during a play break for the kids, and actually seeing the news come by about the Joomla fork from Mambo. So I experienced the birth of Joomla standing at my desk in a classroom teaching some middle school kids.
That's actually pretty cool that you can remember the moment when that happened for you and where you were at that point in time.
Yeah, I've got a pretty clear memory of it. I guess we had a couple of Mambo domain names, and I think quite a few people were anxiously awaiting the release of the new name so that they could jump on and register their Joomla domain names.
I see.
Yeah, it was like there was an embargo of a couple of hours, I think. Maybe my memory is failing me here, but say a company was called Mambo Templates or Mambo Shack, then there was about a 2-hour window in order, I guess they just did this by an honesty policy, a 2-hour window to register all your the Joomla version of your domain name before they opened it up to the world. So yeah, that stuck in my mind.
Oh, wow.
Seeing the name change come down.
Had no idea that was there or available for people.
I guess they were worried about domain name rush of people jumping in to register. Yeah. JoomlaExtensions.com or JoomlaTemplates.com.
Well, imagine if you had a really successful Mambo domain name that was selling templates, and then someone heard it and you didn't know about it, and they managed to grab that domain name before you could, but you've got all these great customers and a user base and all these awesome templates that could work on the new version of Joomla, Joomla 1, and that would have all been pretty much lost, maybe, if you couldn't get the right domain names, especially back then. Domain names were also so important.
Yeah, it was an exciting time. It was, all the companies were fairly new. No one had quite figured out the business model for much of this. I mean, from the training side of things, I don't think there was even an option to run a video training site like we do now. Some people like lynda.com were kind of pioneering things in terms of business models and trying to run a few videos online, but 10 years ago, I think even lynda.com's main business model was actually doing traditional classes still. Linda Weinman, the I guess ex-owner, now they sold to LinkedIn, but the lady in the lynda.com logo, she was just teaching live classroom training in front of students. So many of these things, even 10 years ago, were still being worked out. So
is that your slow segue over? So it's into the training side of things. So you've gone from part-time web designer, developer in your evenings. You've slowly grown that up to a business that made more than your day job. So I'm assuming you transitioned over to that. But then how did you make the transition from a web designer and web builder or web services provider into a fully fledged training website?
I guess I have John Coonan and his CMS Expo to thank for that. It was 2007, and John and Linda Coonan did their, I guess initially they called it the Joomla Expo the first year, and then it became the CMS Expo. And they invited us up to do a training class before the first event up in Chicago. And at that point, I probably hadn't taught for a couple of years. And I'd just been sitting in front of my computer, staring at the screen and building websites for people. And I realized how much I missed actually being in front of people and interacting with them. I mean, particularly being stuck up in the mountains in a fairly rural part of the deep south in the US. I wasn't getting out that much, and going up to Chicago and meeting people, and I missed everything to do with teaching. And I guess that event with John and Linda reminded me of that.
And hence that sparked the idea to actually do it.
Yeah, so we came back and we put on a training class in Atlanta, near where we were in Georgia. And then we did one in New York. We did one in Washington, D.C. We came down to Florida, Miami. We started to travel all over. And for the next few years, that took me all over the U.S., literally probably 40 out of the 50 states in the U.S. We traveled around to do Joomla classes.
That's incredible.
Went to Alaska to do some classes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the Alaskan government was using Joomla for some websites for their national parks. So we got to go up there and go to some of the national parks. New Orleans, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Joomla showed me the US.
How very lucky. How very, very lucky for you. So you were doing, OSTraining was born then, and you were doing a lot of physical classes. I guess technology slowly caught up, and that allowed you to do online video training. About when did that happen?
We launched in February of 2010.
Right, okay, so only like 5 years ago, or 5.5 years ago.
Yeah, it's been, I guess, probably a 10-year cycle. When we started, it was 100% live classroom training. Mm-hmm. Everything we did was person to person, and we're getting to the point where maybe 3 or 4 years ago it was 50-50, and sometime in the next few months it will be pretty close to 100% online training. You're right in saying technology is caught up, and almost everyone either prefers the video training, or they can no longer persuade their bosses to pay for classroom training in their budget.
Yeah, usually the classroom training is a lot more expensive, and having a video training course that you could do at your own pace when you have the time to do it is a lot more flexible to learn.
It is. By the time you've often put the students on a plane and put them up in a hotel, and the teacher has gone on a plane and gone in the hotel, and they've taken a couple of days off work to come to the class, it's fairly logical that the actual live classroom training has faded away. It's expensive to do.
So that's an interesting transition to move purely online and do all that online training. But of course, that would have its own problems, because now you're managing a giant membership website where people are subscribing to the website to gain access to all of the video training and written training as well, I guess. But what made you decide to do that type of business model in terms of a recurring membership for the website, as opposed to, for example, a once-off payment?
We had actually dabbled in selling individual classes and also trying to sell individual tracks, because we added WordPress and Drupal and some coding training too. And it just became really complicated. So maybe we'd have someone with a Joomla subscription and someone else with a WordPress subscription, and maybe we'd sometimes do a special offer so they'd get both. And some people would buy an individual class, and it all started to get really complex and to overlap. I think if I was going to recommend for anyone to start a site like this again, you've either got to go the single class route of something like Udemy, is it?
Yeah, I think it's pronounced Udemy. I was just about to say that.
So they basically have a business model where every single class is $10. They'll advertise them for $500 and say, hey, 99% off. Buy this class for $10. and so you buy each class individually. Or you go the, say, the lynda.com route or the OSTraining route, and you have one subscription to access everything. I think any kind of combination of those ended up being too complicated.
Yeah, I can imagine so, and that's why you moved away from it all. So that's probably a really good tip for anyone else that is wanting to do that. And I'm guessing that membership site has some sort of tiers as well. So maybe month membership, 3-month membership, or yearly membership. Is that right?
Yes, you can have different lengths. We have, and I think most training sites like us have different service levels as well. I think to go back to lynda.com again, they have an extra level where you can pay to download the files, and you get some extra benefits.
Right.
I think it's like twice as expensive. So instead of $25 a month, it's $50 a month, and you get access to extra resources. And we do the same thing, but we do it with support. So if you can sign up at the very basic level and just get access to all the training, or you can subscribe at a higher level and you can get access to our team. We've got a live chat feature, so if something's broken on your site, you can log in and ping our team with questions, and we'll be able to chat back and forth with you and fix the problem.
Very cool indeed. So what video platform are you using to host all of your videos now?
Oh, man. I think a little bit earlier in the conversation, I said the technology wasn't really there when we started 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So we went through a couple of really experimental providers back in 2008, 2009, 2010. Just the people that were first learning how to do online video services. And then we moved to Brightcove, who are enterprise level video hosting. But if you ever go to a newspaper website, they're probably running their videos from Brightcove. But they got to the point where everything got very enterprisey. And in order to get customer support, you'd have to call up the right number. And in order to get any support for your account, you'd have to call up your account representative and wait for them to call you back and sign contracts. And we ended up moving to Wistia.
I've heard of Wistia.
They don't quite have the same technological infrastructure, although they're working on it. One of the reasons we went with Brightcove is because of Australia. I blame the Australians. You guys seem to have really awful internet speeds.
We do. They're terrible.
At least that's what our customers tell us. They keep on saying, "Oh man, we've got the worst connections here. Your videos are running really slowly."
Yeah.
So we moved to Brightcove because they promised to try and solve our speed connections to Australians and South Africans and New Zealanders.
And did they?
Yeah, what they do is pretty clever, and most of the other platforms are catching up to what Brightcove did. So you take your video, it may be a fairly large, often an HD quality video, and there's no way that they can serve an HD video to someone watching on a mobile phone in South Africa or someone watching on a satellite connection in the Australian outback. So what they do is split the video. When it uploads, they split it into probably getting up to 7 or 8 different versions now. So you get the HD version, but they also transcode it. So you get a tiny version for mobile phones, you get a medium version, you get all sorts of different sizes. So if you are watching in the Australian outback, you might get the smallest version, which is fairly low quality and fairly fuzzy, but at least it's going to load for you.
Yeah, and you get the general idea of what's going on, and you can hear the audio, I assume, too.
The quality is probably better than I'm explaining there, but they make sure by dividing it into multiple versions that everyone gets a version that's right for their bandwidth. And then if you're sitting in New York or you're sitting in Sydney on a T1 connection, then you get the full HD version of the video.
Fantastic. So I see that's how it works. Kind of like how YouTube works now with their HD options and lower quality options. You can always flick between the streams.
Yeah, my kids are always watching YouTube on my phone, and it is surprisingly fuzzy if we're outdoors somewhere and they're watching it. Even YouTube will do the same thing and serve a lower quality, fuzzier version.
Well, I guess since they are providing most of that content sort of for free, right? Well, paid via advertising. They do everything they can to reduce the costs of the delivery of the content.
Yeah, video delivery is expensive still.
Very, very interesting. So that sounds pretty cool how you've grown that business over the years and put in what I'm assuming is quite a large membership of people on OSTraining learning about Joomla, WordPress, and Drupal. Now, what else are you guys doing in regards to supporting the business and growing the business in general?
We are working on some books. We wrote Joomla Explained, and then Joomla 3 Explained, and whenever Joomla 4 arrives, we'll write Joomla 4 Explained. So we've actually got a database book coming out in the next couple of weeks.
A database book?
Yeah, it's going to be called, drumroll, MySQL Explained. Explaining how to create, how to understand and think about MySQL and database tables and creating database schema.
Interesting.
Then I'm working on WordPress Explained and Drupal 8 Explained. So yeah, I've got a book series that we're working on. But by and large, we're doubling down on the videos, on producing more videos. We produce new videos every week. If you can get a business off the ground, then running a subscription membership website is as good as many. Having a reliable source of income every single month it's a challenge to get there, but it's certainly having been down the web designers route and had all those highs and lows that come with project work of feast and famine. It's a nice change to have a much more stable income base, and it allows you to do some interesting things that maybe you wouldn't be able to do if you were just waiting for that particular customer to pay that check that is long overdue.
I did a couple of episodes about this previously. I have to dig them up in the show notes. I can't remember which numbers they were, but we spoke specifically about this. Like most of the podcast listeners are service-based providers who have different ways of organizing their deposit fees, their milestone payments to try and spread out that cash flow. But I could definitely see some sort of recurring model. I don't know how it would work for everyone out there in the service industry, but to be able to provide a little bit more stable income with that recurring revenue fee for whatever they're doing.
You know, I met a guy a couple of months ago who's doing it for his web design business. Mm-hmm. And the way it works is he will sign them up on a 18-month contract, and they'll pay him about $300 US a month, I think. And his rationale behind that is normally if you're building a web design site for a customer, the way it works is you'll get them to pay $5,000 up front, and lots of small businesses just don't have $5,000 lying around.
Very true.
So he'll basically spread the cost of that new website over 18 months. He'll lock them in for, say, a few $100 a month. It's much easier for the customer to pay, and then at the beginning, he'll eat the cost of building their new website, but then he'll get their regular fee, and he'll also get them on a maintenance and update agreement. And nearly always, he said, those customers will stay with him after the end of the 18-month period. So he's basically approaching web design as a subscription service.
That's pretty unique. I've heard one or two other people trying that, but I don't know if they were successful or not. So it's pretty good to know that it actually can work.
Yeah, the trick is to get that initial commitment, I think, of the 18 months, or perhaps you could do it for 2 years.
It'll be also interesting to know if what happens if the business goes bust in 6 months. What happens to the rest of the contract at that point?
Yeah, good question. That's some of the risk he takes on, I guess. He takes on the upfront risk. He probably swallows $2,000 or $3,000 in costs in order to build the site out for the customer. Mm-hmm. And yeah, possibly if it's a startup or if it's a business which maybe doesn't have that much potential, then you're best off avoiding that customer, perhaps looking for the more stable, more reliable customers.
Yeah, that type of business that's been around for 10 years and now they're just trying to approach the online space and try and expand there. So they'll have an offline business that could actually provide for that new online venture. That's probably a less risky customer for that type of business model.
So he was saying he sleeps a lot better.
Oh, really?
He knows that he has his staff salaries covered every month. Even if he doesn't make any sales, then he has the recurring revenue to cover everyone's salary at the end of the month. Yeah, he said he's a lot more relaxed than he was when he was living the roller coaster lifestyle of a services business.
All right. And any other tips or any other things that you're looking at in growing the OSTraining or your business in general?
For us, I guess the next step may be to we're trying to figure out what comes beyond the big three CMSs that we cover at the moment. We do Joomla, we do WordPress, we do Drupal, and we're investigating what other topics might be of interest to the people that we're working with at the moment.
Like something like web design fundamentals or programming techniques, things like that?
Yeah, that would be one option to go, although those tend to be fairly well covered by all of the different training sites that are out there now.
Very true.
It's only become a crowded market. It may be that we start to look at some of the up-and-coming platforms like Grav from Rocket Theme, or perhaps PageKit from UTheme. We've dabbled into looking at things like Magento as well. So those are and obviously we've got a more generic database book coming out. So we started as a Joomla, Drupal, WordPress platform and grown that pretty big. So we're kind of looking for what might be the next step to allow us to expand from there.
Just to jump back a little bit, when you're setting out different levels and subscriptions for your membership site, so you're providing the subscription as like a higher fee, etc. Do you do any split A/B testing or conversion rate optimization to see what works best, which price point you can try and get people to sign up to? Do you do anything like that you can share with the listeners to help with their membership sites?
Yes, we do, although it does become tricky with membership sites. Take the example of a regular e-commerce website. It's really easy to A/B test between a $17 subscription or a $27 subscription. You can see how many people sign up, and then you can do your math and figure out which one is making you more money. Whereas with a subscription service, the math becomes a little more difficult because you need to try and convince them to stay for a longer period of time too. So it's all well and good signing someone up for $50 for the first month, but if that feels like a burden, and it may feel like a burden pretty quickly, then you may only keep that customer for a month or 2 months. Whereas maybe you sign them up at a lower price, but they think, okay, I can afford that each month. Something like your Netflix fee. Netflix is opened in Australia, right?
Yeah. So I'm paying my subscription, I think is $11 a month.
Yeah, so that's the kind of really nice price point where you think you get enough value out of it, and it's not really a dent in your wallet at $11 a month, right?
Yeah, that's right. And if I don't watch anything, $11, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's like a cup of coffee almost these days at Starbucks.
Yes, Starbucks coffee is ridiculously expensive.
So that's probably where we come in. That if you're selling a regular product, a one-off product, then you really do need to optimize for the absolute maximum you can make at the initial sale. Whereas if you're running a membership site, you need to think longer term and say, what price point will the customer still be happy with in 12 months' time? It's hard to figure out initially when you launch because you don't have any statistics, you don't have any information to analyze that and to figure out. You have to go by instinct to some extent.
Some guesswork, and then hopefully you can collect the data and verify your hypothesis, I guess.
Yeah, we use a a statistics software package called Chart Mogul,
Right.
which taps into our subscription system, and it'll tell us things such as if someone signs up at $17 per month, how long are they staying with us on average? Or if someone signs up at $37 a month, how long are they staying with us? And so it calculates the actual lifetime value of the customer. Now we have several years of data to go on. It becomes much easier. But yes, absolutely, the initial part of it was definitely guesswork.
Wow, Chart Mogul. I'll grab a link off you for that website. Or is it just chartmogul.com?
Yes, it's not particularly cheap, but because this is the core of our business, it's worth it for us.
Yeah, especially if you can optimize the price point, the initial price point, and work out how you can keep your customer for a long length of time. It's crucial. You just need it. Very interesting indeed, Steve. Now, I know, so that I'm just looking at the customer journey and the life cycle of the customer there. You're getting the customer signed up, and you're providing a brilliant, fantastic service, which I know you guys do, and you're keeping them on for a long period of time, or as long as that particular member needs to. Do you provide additional products? I know you do the books, so I'm assuming some students will buy books, but do you provide any like software or anything else during that customer's life cycle?
We focus on the training, and the support is a big part of it too, because training is one of those products which is, I guess, a little backwards when it comes to running a membership service, in that the more successful you are at training, the more likely the customer is to leave. You run most businesses, and the better you are at your work, the more likely the customer is to stay.
Yeah.
Whereas if you do a really good job and you explain Joomla to the customer in a couple of months, like, okay, well, I've learned everything I need.
See you later.
Yes. So the extra thing we provide is support. That we always have a chat window with one of our team monitoring it. So if any of our members get stuck, or their site breaks, or they get hacked, or they have a question, they can always log on and pop us a question, and one of our team will get back to them immediately.
Okay, fair enough. So I was looking also on your site, and I saw there's links and stuff to Aledia. And that looked like a whole bunch of software that you guys have been putting together and developing. So how does that fit into the mix, or is that completely separate to OSTraining?
That is all the stuff we've done for ourselves that we decided to open source.
Ah, I see. So all the little bits of software extensions that you use to build OSTraining.
Yeah, for example, we drop a lot of YouTube videos in our blog posts, and we got frustrated that it was so hard. We just wanted to drop a YouTube link in our content and for it to work and be responsive. So we created a little plugin called OS YouTube, which will take any single YouTube URL and automatically convert it to a responsive display with some extra tweaks as well.
That's pretty cool. So normally a common Joomla plugin to do that, you'll put in like curly bracket YouTube, end curly bracket, ID of the video from YouTube, and then end curly bracket / YouTube, that kind of thing. So you've removed all that messy code.
Yeah, that's a clunky experience.
Yeah, it is very clunky, and you have to remember the syntax that you're trying to type in, and if you get a curly bracket somewhere along there, which I think I did in that example, it stuffs up.
So we did that. We did one for Vimeo videos as well to do the same thing. And we have a downloads extension which will collect an email address in exchange for the download, called OS Downloads. And we've open sourced the software we use to run our own subscription system. We started off with Community Builder and CB subs. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I've learned over the 10 years or so of doing this is that open source extensions, open source plugins, open source software is often a wonderful way to test an idea. So when we launched OSTraining originally, we got CB subs for $100 maybe. We got Kunena for free. We managed to put the site together, the first iteration, for a couple of $100. And that's great when you launch, but over time, your business starts to go off in fairly unique ways. And once you've proved your business model at a really cheap price, then you can start to build your own solutions which are custom to your need. So we open sourced our subscription system and we called it Simple Renew. And that's basically full of all the little things that we needed to do in order to keep our customers happy, in order to make it easy for them to cancel or easy for them to upgrade or downgrade.
Have that really seamless experience throughout the website for their membership management.
Yeah, if someone's going to give you their credit card and let you keep it for a year or 5 years for some of our customers, then there's a huge trust factor there. And I guess one of the things we found is that you really need to try and repay that trust. That if someone sees their credit card data on the screen and there's anything that feels odd or strange about it, that's a pretty crappy experience to feel your credit card is in the hands of someone that can't quite get their software right or can't quite be trusted with it. So, yeah, we ended up realizing that we needed to be as reliable and reassuring as we possibly could.
Very interesting indeed. And you've made that available for the general public to be able to... so I'm assuming, is it a free download or is it a paid download? It's free?
Yeah.
Wow. How very nice of you.
Yeah, we've got a few Joomla extension developers using it or starting to use it too. And it's not going to be at least anytime soon, it's not going to be a big product of ours, but that's what Aledia is essentially. We have come up with all these little needs that we've encountered over the years and developed our own software for it, and we've started to open source it. Probably the one exception is when XMAP faded away over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
We took it over, or I guess we took over a fork of it, called it OSMap, and we're continuing to develop that to make it easy for people to build sitemaps in Joomla.
Yeah, sitemaps are very important and not easy to do, especially when trying to create XML files.
No, it's actually proved to be considerably more challenging than we'd assumed initially, particularly because it's one of those extensions that needs to play nicely with so many others as well.
Yeah, very true.
But yeah, that's what Aledia is basically. It's an outlet for all the things we've developed ourselves.
Absolutely brilliant. You are definitely keeping yourself busy there, Steve. Now, before we wrap things up, first off, did you realize that there is a podcast episode of you with Peter Russell from the podcast name Joomla Juice Online? Did you realize that was up?
I didn't realize it was still online. That was many years ago, right?
Yeah, many years ago. Peter Russell gave me copies of all the podcast episodes that he had recorded over the years, and I think I've just finished uploading them all onto my Spreaker account. So these go back to, I think, 2007. So it fills in the world of all of those old podcasts and all those old interviews and your younger self.
Oh, man. Pete is, well, I guess everyone has quite a journey in 10 years, but I think Pete has had more of a journey than anyone.
Indeed.
What year was that, Pete? It was 2008, 2007, 2008?
I think your podcast episode that you're in, let me just double check. Apparently 2009, according to the modified date here. But okay. That might be wrong.
For those that don't know, Pete, he was someone who was very heavily involved in Mambo and then Joomla in the early days, and particularly, I think, in Australia, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Was, very heavily involved and still is in the Australian community, and he had stage 4 melanoma for a while, and he was just in the last few months announced as fully recovered. One of the very few people I think ever to come all the way back, and seems to be in good health now.
Yeah, very happy spirits. He lives in Shepparton, which is country Victoria. along with all of his souped-up old muscle cars, which he loves. So thank you so much, Steve, for joining on this podcast episode and sharing with the listeners all that stuff about membership sites and all the little bits and pieces of your business growing over the years. Is there potentially an offer that you can provide to the Joomla Beat listeners to experience OSTraining if they haven't yet?
Yes, absolutely. We can do a 2-week free trial for Joomla Beat members, and that would get you access to our support and to, I think we're closing in on 40 different Joomla classes now.
40?
Everything from beginner and intermediate classes to Fabric, Seabold, RS Form Pro, updating Joomla 1 to Joomla 3 or Joomla 2 to Joomla 3. We even have a few Joomla 1.5 classes still hanging around in the library.
Hey, well, there's still a few 1.5 sites around, so if you're stumbling on Joomla for the first time, you need to know how to use it. But 40 classes, that's insane.
Oh, we've been around a while now.
Yeah, I guess so. That's true. Yeah, very, very true. Well, thank you so much, Steve, for that offer. What do the listeners have to do to get that offer?
Oh, we'll put a link to ostraining.com/JoomlaBeat, and that'll be, I guess, in the show notes as well.
Cool. Excellent. I'll put that in the show notes, and if anyone wants to take Steve on that offer for the 2-week free trial, make sure you take that up. Cool. Awesome, Steve. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Pete.
Thanks for all your time, and thanks for all your effort and all the wonderful things that you're doing for the Joomla community.
Looking for more Joomla tips and industry news? Joomla.at. Web hosting by SiteGround.
All right. There's a lot of learnings and takeaways there, as well as that awesome special offer. So Steve built up that business, actually worked out that it was a brilliant idea to do the training, and because he loved it and had the passion behind there as well, it really worked out for him. So building that up, finding the passion of what he actually wanted to do, back to the teaching and the training aspects of it, doing the physical training, the in-class training that took him all around the States, and offering people all those training classes really built up the business. But now being able to pivot and change over to just online training, which is pretty cool. It makes it a little bit easier, and then I guess Steve can concentrate on bigger training projects that clients would be paying for around the States. So that's pretty cool. The other learning and takeaway there is needing to, building your minimal viable product. I think that was a good point. He spent very minimal amount of money getting his website up and running and just getting the training off the ground using CB subs. So that was a pretty quick way of getting around it. I guess it also helps in the fact that he could actually build websites too. That's kind of handy. But after a while managing and building up the business model, either choosing paid per course or paid prescription to gain everything. After Steve worked that out, the idea of building custom components to actually manage the entire site and entire user experience is probably really key. Importantly, that had to be seamless so that the user didn't feel that it was disjointed, it was unsafe to use. So I think that was another really good and important point. So thank you, Steve, for sharing all of those pearls of wisdom with all of us here on the Joomla Beat podcast. Now, lastly, if you loved what Steve is doing, if you haven't seen any of his training courses before and you are starting out or even an advanced or moderate user of Joomla, his training courses cover a huge depth of thing. I've just signed up. I had a look around as well. And I did so ages ago, right at the very beginning, when he first started OSTraining, going through all his training courses. So it's really good material, really good stuff, and could really help you out. So take out that offer, the 2 weeks free training from OSTraining by going to ostraining.com/JoomlaBeat. Try it out for yourself. and see just how good the training is. It's absolutely brilliant. The video quality is fantastic. It's good stuff. Okay, that's it for another episode of the Joomla Beat podcast. Now make sure you jump onto the iTunes store and leave a 5-star rating review if you enjoyed this podcast episode. And if you want to be on the 100th episode of this podcast, you want to hear your voice. Actually, a lot of people don't like hearing their voice. But if you want to be on the podcast, make sure you go to that SpeakPipe page, speakpipe.com/JoomlaBeat. Leave a little message, congratulations, hi, hello, introduce yourself, or whatever you want to do. You have 90 seconds there to include a message to the rest of the world and to cement yourself in the 100th episode of the Joomla Beat podcast. Can't believe we finally made it. We're almost there. One more week to go. All right. Until next time, everyone, please keep your website safe, secure, and make sure you keep them backed up. Bye.
You've been listening to the Joomla Beat podcast, bringing together the community of designers, developers, fans, and users from around the globe. Joomla Beat. Joomla Beat.at